Hello and welcome to Channels Television's end of year program, where we take a look at the past year that will end just in a few hours from now. Jeffrey Uzango.
Indeed, it's a year of transition for many reasons, which we'll delve into. But we'd like to welcome you first of all. I am Bukola Koka.
You don't want to think about it, but yes, indeed, 2024 is around the corner. 2023 is heading out in a few minutes, as Jeffrey has already said. I'm Neota Igbe.
I'm Millicent Walker, who's as excited as I am.
Really? We look forward to a fantastic 2024.
Yes, indeed. So we have lots lined out for our viewers. But Jeffrey and Bukola, you know, I spent Christmas in the nation's capital. How was Christmas for you in Lagos?
Oh, Christmas was beautiful, regardless of the ups and downs and the many challenges of the outgoing year. We still celebrated Christmas. Jeffrey?
Well, Millicent is now, in the words of an average Nigerian, peppering us that she's now in the nation's capital. I guess this may be your first Christmas in the nation's capital. Maybe after the show, we're going to find out exactly how it went for you. But as you said, not just looking at the past year, we also look into the year 2024. That's why, well, in just about 6 hours, 2023 will be our past forever. But what memories and moments will be referenced as the most defining for us as a nation?
Is it the rocky start with a currency redesign policy that left a bitter taste for all? A highly divisive, keenly contested, hugely disputed presidential election that polarized the polity, an inaugural presidential pronouncement that sent shockwaves into the economy.
Or the travails of the Apex Bank's chief, Godwin Emefiele, the arrest of the lead anti-graft agency boss, Abdulrasheed Bawa, record high inflation numbers, historic stock market performance, President Bola Tinubu presenting his very first budget of 27.5 trillion naira for the year 2024.
Or could it be when two of Nigeria's finest won the CAF Player of the Year award? Chef Hilda Bassi setting new world cooking record, or 5 Nigerians nominated for the Grammys.
Or could it be the sad part of the carnage on the plateau, the accidental bombing that left over 80 persons dead in Kaduna State?
Or the solemn moment when Arakunrin Oluwarotimi Odunayo Akeredolu died, leaving a state in mourning. And not forgetting the recent River State political imbroglio dotted by an array of the absurd.
But on this special program to end the year, we would also look forward to 2024, as I said, with the benefit of hindsight, and make sense of this very moment with a team of selected guests across sectors and across institutions. And
once again, welcome to Channels Television's end-of-year program, tagged the Year of Transition. Nyota and Millicent.
Indeed, this year has had its share of challenges, but as it winds down, we anticipate a better future. The rocky state of affairs, marked by storms in the 2023, witnessed the birth of new government at the federal and state levels.
Well, new leaders bring fresh ideas, and key institutions like the Central Bank of Nigeria and the anti-corruption agencies have new leadership. The government has also introduced new tax policies with which it aims to reshape the nation's economy. Meanwhile, the budget, applauded by some for their novel approaches, raised questions about implementation.
And amid these changes, the nation grapples with a pressing security situation. Recent attacks during the Yuletide underscore the challenges facing the security agencies, who have pledged to adopt a different approach, despite the hurdles like personnel and funding shortages.
So as we transition from the snippets of 2023, let's cast our gaze into the horizon of 2024 with one of the burning questions on everyone's mind: will Nigeria's inflation dip? According to CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso, inflation may persist in the short term, but is expected to decline in the new year. Now, you might be wondering about exchange rate. Well, the governor of the central bank also anticipates that the exchange rate pressures are expected to reduce significantly with the smooth functioning of the FX market.
Promising initiatives indeed in 2024. We have the student loan initiative set to kick off providing interest-free loans to higher education students. The Tinubu administration is channeling 2.2 trillion in the 2024 budget towards prioritizing education. I remember the insights from the presidential spokesman Ajirin Galali in his 2024 prospectus. He mentions over 1 trillion naira saved from the removal of petrol subsidy, which will be used to fund the students' loan program. Additionally, these savings will contribute to establishing a consumer credit system, a first in Nigeria's history, aimed at addressing the credit gap of the 70% of bank account holders without access to credit.
So we're looking ahead on the economic front is also a federal government that aims to achieve a $1 trillion economy by 2026. Our esteemed guests will be assessing these plans for the new year shortly. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your concerns and expectations for 2024? Share key points you want the government to address promptly. You can send your thoughts using the X hashtag, that's former Twitter, hashtag Year of Transition. We now begin with a look at the nation's economy so far.
2023 began with Nigerians queuing for hours and at other scenarios paying for cash because of naira scarcity, a spillover from the 2022 naira redesign policy, which the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, had initiated in October 2022.
You will all recall that on the 26th of October 2022, the Central Bank of Nigeria received the approval of President Muhammadu Buhari to redesign the 200 naira, 500 naira, and 1,000 naira Nigerian banknotes. By that approval, the redesigned banknotes will circulate concurrently with the old notes up to January 31, 2023, after which date, the old note loses their legal tender status.
This created uncertainty in an economy where cash remains king.
We are really facing a very critical time as manufacturers now.
In November 2023, the Supreme Court ordered that the old notes remain legal tender indefinitely to be used alongside the new notes. However, this has not done enough to allay the fears of cash shortage as incidents of scarcity again resurfaced in December 2023. And while Nigerians were dealing with the economic and social disruptions that came with the policy, on the one hand, they had to gear up for the general elections, which had been fixed for between February and March 2023.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
And just when certainty and stability was returning with the conclusion of the elections, the President Bola Tinubu made an announcement which had been hanging in the air.
First subsidy is gone.
The consequences of the removal of subsidy was not limited to hiking petrol prices, but as expected, it spread to food prices. Headline inflation rose to 22.41% in May from 22.22% in April 2023, while food prices increased to 24.82% in May from 24.61% in April. These have since increased to 28.2% for the headline inflation, and food inflation is at 32.84%, billed for November 2023.
In any reasonable person's mind that Nigeria needs to remove the subsidy to remove the drag on our revenue of the fiscal drag we have through the subsidy. But the point is that on whose shoulder will the hurt be? Should the government continue to behave as if there's no problem?
Another major pronouncement of the president was the unification of the various foreign exchange windows.
Central Bank must work towards a unified exchange rate.
However, this has been difficult to achieve, as the naira to the dollar, which had gone from less than 500 naira for a dollar in May 2023 to more than 1,000 naira to a dollar by December 2023. The continued squeeze in the FX space and drop in the value of the naira has discouraged the operations of foreign companies, as some have either closed shop or changed operating model to import only. The pinch is also felt in the aviation sector, where according to the International Air Transport Association, IATA, as of August 2023, Nigeria accounts for $783 million of airlines' blocked funds, with the threat of foreign airlines exiting the country still on. The hike in jet fuel was another aftermath of the shortage of FX and drop in the value of the naira. There were also near mishap in the sector. For instance, on September the 9th, 2023, a United Airlines plane skidded off the runway in Lagos. On November the 14th, 62 passengers escaped death when a ValueJet aircraft skidded off the runway at the Port Harcourt International Airport in Rivers State. There was also a Cali Air commercial aircraft that broke down on the runway on November the 12th, leading to flight disruptions at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. Perhaps seeking an elaborate and permanent solution, President Tinubu effected a shake-up in the leadership of the aviation industry in December 2023. The bright side for 2023, however, lies in the Nigeria's equity market. Investors seem to embrace the victory of President Tinubu as benchmark indicator of performance surged from 50,000 level to above 72,000 level in December 2023. As 2023 draws to a close and Nigerians look forward to 2024, they expect to get some benefit from some of those economic reforms of President Bola Tinubu, which has been applauded by both the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, such as benefits from the removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of the FX windows, among others. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
Well, 2023 that is about to come to an end is what we call the year of the transition, because this is the year we got a new president and he's already presented his budget to the people of Nigeria. 27.5 trillion naira, that has been upscaled and reviewed forward or upward to about 28.7 trillion naira. We will look at 2024 critically and just take a snippet into 2023 as we look at all of this conversation. But whilst we're trying to expect a brand new year, let's let you know that New Zealand, Australia, Japan, as well as other countries are already in a brand new year. So whilst we're waiting, some people are already in 2024. Well, this segment is going to be, we're going to be talking about our economy, how well we did and what we look forward to in 2024, or how badly we did and what we look forward to in 2024. And we're being joined right here in our Lagos studio by the CEO of Financial Derivatives, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Mr. Bismarck, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us in our Lagos studio is the president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa. Mr. Idahosa,
thank you.
Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Joining us via Zoom is the country director, Power Gain Renewable Nigeria Limited, Sheon Edu. Mr. Sheon Edu, thank you so much for coming on the program.
It's a pleasure being here.
And we also have joining us via Zoom as well, Mr. Temitola Adekunle Johnson. He's the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Job Creation and MSMEs. Thank you so much for joining us. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps let me start with you, Mr. Idahosa, on this particular one. When we look at the basic economic indicators, and I've listened to Mr. Rewani on this, and you look at when targets are set, when you look at the target and actual meeting of those targets, you see that there was some shortfall. In fact, as a couple of them, the basics, looks like we ended in the red. So just before we look into 2024, what do you think informs some of this inability to meet this target?
Well, at the time the targets were set, there was the hope that the plan will work after the new government set up a budget against that plan, and there was hope that those two major decisions, the removal of fuel and the conversions of foreign exchange, will produce the kind of impact within that time frame. But clearly, most observers of the economy knew that it was not possible for that to happen, and that you needed perhaps 9 months to 1 year to begin to see any benefit from those key decisions. So it was not a surprise that we didn't meet those targets.
I think let's now head to Abuja, where we have Mr. Temitola Adekunle. I will also put that same question to you, because at the end of the day, if we have to look forward, it's just natural for us to look at the past and see, okay, where didn't we do well? So similar question I asked Mr. Dausa. Why do you think there were these shortfalls or shortcomings in your own view?
Thank you once again, thank you to viewers out there. In my own opinion, I think when anyone sets in, when you set in to achieve whatever targets or goals, you probably have best intentions. You know, what I think, or what I suspect happened, or what's happening, is that before Mr. President came in, he made a number of campaigns and had certain targets he was aiming to hit. So when he came into government, there are certain harsh realities, which are what I would rather call realities on ground. Now, those realities on ground are probably what are some of the limitations militating against achieving or hitting some of these targets. However, the good thing is that he said to everybody in the team that he's focused on hitting certain targets, and constantly reminds all of us that no one pushed him to be president, that he asked to be president. So it's not about going around complaining. He's met saying things, setting unfavorable situations on ground. He intends to hit the ground running. He intends for us to, okay, there's been a holiday period, so he intends for us to move very quickly to see how we can eliminate sufferings of people, especially within the small business space, and create more jobs. Thank you.
So I'm going to come to you now, Mr. Adekunle Johnson. And one of the questions we started, asking as we started off the program was, will inflation dip in 2024? And there have been assurances from the CBN governor and from the Minister of Finance that indeed the inflation will dip and the naira will strengthen. Now, but if this will happen in 2024, have the structures been put on ground for us to see, an upscale either of the currency or for inflation to go down? Mr. Adekunle Johnson, that question is for you.
So one of the things I'm very certain about, one of the directives of Mr. President is that we're focusing strongly on production. And we're focusing on trying to ensure that those parameters or those enablers that will ensure that we move strongly into production are in place. Some of them are in place right now, some of them are not. Some of them might take a couple of months to put them in place, but there are workings behind the scenes to ensure that we strongly embark on a production drive in this country. And I guess it is for those reasons and a few other reasons that both the Minister of Finance, there's the Minister for Coordinating Economy, and the CBN governor, that's where their confidence must be coming in from. So they are quite certain that if certain variables are in place, that the naira, by the special grace of God, will start doing better to the dollar. And inflation, will probably dip as they have projected.
I'm going to bring the same question now to Mr. Rewani. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will want to hear from you as well, based on statistics and figures. But if we weighed it against the prediction just 24 hours into 2024 by Bloomberg that, Nigeria's currency performed abysmally in 2023 and was going to do even worse in 2024, and devaluation again was recommended. What are your thoughts on this? Is it the way to go?
First of all, let me step back. You can't talk about the future without talking about the past and the present. What we describe 2023, 2024 is a tumultuous past and an uncertain future. And I'll start with 3 quotes. One is that it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive. And 2, only fools rush where angels fear to tread. And 3, a bad decision is better than no decision because you can change it. But having said that, what did the year hold? Nigeria versus the rest of the world, Nigeria versus Africa. If you look at the 3 parameters of growth, inflation and export growth and share of investments 4, in all cases, Nigeria was in the red. Nigeria underperformed the rest of the world, underperformed Africa, and also underperformed, the previous year. And so, but the scorecard was pretty simple. We looked at about 8 parameters, in fact 9 parameters. 5 of them were negative and 4 were positive. And I'll take you through it very carefully. The GDP growth actually declined from 3.25 to 2.45. That was a slight dip of about 0.80. Per capita income per head, you can see went down from $2,202 to $1,775, which is 20%. So Nigerians were 20% poorer in 2023. Inflation at the beginning of the year was 21.34. We ended up at about 28.2, and we're going to have inflation numbers next week. We're projecting that it will be about 29%. The exchange rate last year in the parallel market was 740, and today it's closing at about 1,215 naira, a drop of about 70%. That's what Bloomberg was talking about. Oil production increased marginally from 1.2 to 1.34 million barrels. External reserves dropped from 37 to 32, but the external reserves are what we call the gross reserves. If you discount it for encumbrances, actually dropped further. External debt went up from 41.69 to, actually improved to 41.59. Students that passed WAEC, English and Maths, 64% in 2022 and 79% in 2023. The national grid collapsed 12 times in 2022, and collapsed only 3 times in 2024. You already summarized it at the 4 distinct quarters. First quarter was naira scarcity and elections, right? Second quarter was inauguration and celebrations.
Mr. Rewani, of course, there's a lot I know you're going to talk about.
Yes.
Let's now take it to Mr. Ashenwodu, the country director for Power Gen Renewable Nigeria Limited. Since you mentioned our power grid collapsing 12 times, I don't know whether that's a record time in the history, but
in 2022, in 2023, you got better. Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, Mr. Ashenwodu, let's come to you on this particular issue. We're looking at the future, and by simple mathematical extrapolations, I don't know whether it is possible to say that if it collapsed 12 times, it will not collapse at all, because these are some of the fundamentals, as people like Mr. Rewani will say, that is necessary to be able to, revamp an economy. So what are we looking at in the year 2024 in terms of power? You're a player in that sector. What are you seeing that looks promising based on the anticipation of the government for this renewed hope budget to put Nigeria back on that particular plateau they want it to be? Mr. Edu?
Right, thank you for that question. From my point of view, the grid in itself is epileptic. We're not going to be able to solve that in a couple of years. It still requires significant investments. And even with finding the right investments for the grid expansion, it takes considerable time to actually expand the national grid, right? Which is why there has to be increased focus on off-grid energy access, right? We're making the little steps in the right directions in that regard. And going into 2024, especially now with the approved $750 million from the World Bank and an additional $1 billion from development associations into off-grid energy access, we're going to start to see a lot of growth in that space, improving energy access to the unserved and underserved Nigerians across the country.
Okay, Mr. Bismarck, we needed to bring him in since he's a player in that sector. Okay. We didn't intend to cut your line of thought, so you may just continue from where you stopped.
What did the president say at inauguration? Subsidy is gone, but subsidy was actually reduced. 2, there's convergence of exchange rates and reducing in windows into 1. The consequence of that is the following. The government, money has been transferred from consumers to the government because subsidies are reverse taxes. If you reduce them, you increase the taxes, reduce people's income. What has happened is the government revenue has increased by almost 44% between the month of May and the month of June. In other words, where we were sharing 600, 700 billion naira earlier, we are now sharing as of this month, we are sharing about 1.9 trillion naira. So money has been transferred to the government. And what is the government doing with it? The consumers, on the other hand, they had the minimum wage, which in dollar terms was about $40 in 2002. In 2019, that was $70. It has now reduced to $24. So what have we done? The government has introduced some palliatives. The way the palliatives have been dimensioned and the way whether it is getting to the people is another issue altogether. Finally, investors and markets, the Nigerian stock market actually gained by 45% against an inflation factor of 30%. So investors are making out very well. And 365-day treasury bills actually increased in value, but the rate is much lower than the rate of inflation. So if you invested in treasury bills, you lost 17% of your money. But what is more important to everybody here is this data is abstract. We must go into the details of what happened. A bag of rice in 2022 was 47,000. As of yesterday, that bag of rice was going for 70,000 naira. So a decline of 48.94%. A bag of beans was 36,000 naira in 2022. It's now up to 42,000 naira, an increase of 16%. A bag of flour for making bread was 34,000 naira at the end of 2022. It's now 46,000 naira, up 35%. A bag of tomatoes, 22,000 naira in 2022, is up by 13% to 25,000 naira. And a loaf of bread, I think called agege bread, was 700, it's now 1,200. So generally speaking, everybody is under pressure.
But Mr. Rewani, the revolving door on which all of these indicators are hinged is a pump price of fuel. Yes. And there is a promise, in the year 2024 that in the first quarter, the Port Harcourt refinery will kick off perhaps at the end of the first quarter. And there's an even bigger promise that, Dangote refinery will start working soon.
Starting now.
Although there is, the government officials are non-committal about whether that will force down the price of petrol. No. Well, what do you project to happen if these refineries start working? Will it bring down the price of petrol and have an impact on?
No, it will not bring. It will guarantee you supply. It will reduce the transportation cost of taking crude to Rotterdam, refining it and bringing it back. That's all. It will guarantee you supply. And to the extent that it's always, it's available, means that productivity will increase. Secondly, because the Dangote refinery is situated in the Ekpe Road, so the amount of traffic and wear and tear coming to Lagos and all of that will reduce. So significantly, it will increase productivity. But it's not a silver bullet that is going to do anything, and it's not going to make the exchange rate any better. But in all of this, though, when we dimension it, we say that the total amount of money put in is 615 billion naira, but the total money taken out is about 1.7, or in fact, about 2 trillion. So net, people are bleeding, and government is laughing. Okay.
All right, Mr. Let's bring it to Mr. Dausa. I read something, I think a statement about 2 days ago, I want to quote what he said, the Catholic Archbishop of Lagos, Most Reverend Alfred Adewale Martins. He titled it, "Allow Nigerians Breathe" in 2024. And this is directed at the state and the federal government. This is what he said. All that Nigerians are asking for, following what Mr. Riwani has said, all that Nigerians are asking for are policies that will bring down the high cost of foodstuff, reduce transportation costs, and provide gainful employment for the jobless, especially the youth. Isn't this a fair request? And in your view, do you see our budget for 2024 meeting the aspiration as anticipated by the rhetoric?
It's a fair request. It's a legitimate request. That's why you have government. Government has some very basic obligations to the people. But the basis of meeting those requests is the question. The inflation now has two essential drivers, transportation and food. In fact, food inflation is the primary driver. And how do you deal with food inflation? You need the farmers to be able to go to farm and to go there every day in safety. If you don't have farmers going to farm every day and producing food, you are guaranteed food inflation. It has nothing to do with whatever policy or no policy or any budget or budget that you don't make. And we know that to guarantee access to our farms, you have to provide security. The security arrangement in Nigeria now is not working. So if you don't have a security system that guarantees access to farmers all year round, there is no science of dealing with food inflation. So you have to go back to deal with that. You have to have a system, a security system that is sustainable. And the only one that is known is to move the policing system from where it is now in the federal exclusive list to a concurrent list, so that you can have all hands on deck as far as security is concerned. The federal police, the state police, and other subnational police. That is what works in all the countries of a size comparable to Nigeria. There's no country even half or one-third the size of Nigeria that does not have policing at various levels down the line. If you don't guarantee access to the farm, there is no talk about food security, and you cannot avoid food inflation. Every inflation figure we get is led by food inflation. If you don't deal with that, you can play with budget, play with policies, but you will not have food on the table.
Let me take it to Mr. Edu, who is joining us via Zoom. The reason will always come to you as soon as we get maybe somebody just makes a statement in passing about power, because power is fundamental. I did remember that when the president was campaigning and he went to Chatham House, he literally criticized that sector, saying it's a broken model and it will be fixed. You are a player in that sector. What fixing are you seeing going on, and what are the propositions that players like you are putting forward to the government to say, look, if there's anything that has to work first? In fact, some people have even proposed, like, instead of having a 1 point that's 8 points, 7 points, 4 points like they have, sometimes government should just have 1 point agenda. Maybe we'll fix power within our 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be. So what exactly are you seeing that is showing that the president is committed to fixing what he called a broken model? And what are you people proposing? I mean, you people in the people in the sector, the players.
Right, thank you. The fixing is simple. Like I mentioned earlier, fixing the national grid is going to take a while. The slow wins, the quick wins we can make is in off-grid distributed energy resources, right? Take off-grid power, right, to our rural communities, our metros, off-grid generation and distribution assets, right? Which we've been, it's little steps, it's still early days, but we're making those steps in that direction. As at the end of Q3, the NEP program of the REA had already recorded connecting over 45,000 households. That's energizing over 200,000 people. We expect those numbers to grow exponentially as soon as the DARES program is started next year. Developers ourselves are also bringing foreign investments into the sector, right? But I think in terms of policy, we have the right framework in terms of policy to enable investments in off-grid DERs, so to speak. But what we need to do is it's an enabling low-interest local currency facilities, which would help in making the tariffs affordable, right, to those rural communities that we intend to take them to. It's closely linked to agricultural production and food security. If we can take power to the rural communities, it will enable them in having adequate post-harvest processing, storage facilities, which would also help in mitigating high agricultural commodity losses at our rural areas.
A quick follow-up to that, Mr. Adekunle Johnson, Mr. Edun. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Edun. In terms of increasing energy access for Nigerians, you talked about that earlier on. What should we begin to expect in 2024 from the partnership that Nigeria has signed with Siemens for the provision of infrastructure to states? What should we expect in that regard? And then for alternative sources of power, particularly in rural areas, a continuation of the rural electrification program, what alternative sources of energy should we begin to expect from the federal government that you will be proposing such that there will be less reliance on the grid?
Right. Thank you very much. Like I said earlier, the new Electricity Act is a good thing. We now see a few states, Ekiti, Lagos, Ondo, and some other ones are putting up their electricity laws. That would help significantly in improving energy access in our rural areas. Talking about alternative energy sources, it's mostly solar, which is what we do as well, solar hybrids, which we can also interconnect it to the grid if it's available. Like I said, we've been making slow progresses, but we see that that subsector of the power industry in itself, of the Nigerian electricity supply industry in itself, will grow exponentially within the next couple of years, with more investments coming in, and also now with the World Bank approval for an additional $750 million, and on top of that, another $1 billion from international development partners. We'll see a lot of growth in that space to mostly rural communities, taking energy access to rural communities, and we have a target of hitting about 17.5 million connections in the next couple of years, which is still scratching the surface, but little progresses, like I would like to say.
Let's get to our Abuja studio, where we have Ms. Adekunle Johnson. Of course, you're the one in government, so I'm sure you have an insider scoop as to some of these things, and especially in your area of job creation and MSMEs. As far as this is concerned, we will stay with this rural electrification issue because I don't see. I want you to be able to explain to us at the end of the day, if the government is able to pull this through, how much opportunity this will create. Because sometimes when you don't put some of this initiative, you don't know what level of explosion economically that will come through. I'll give you an example. Until the internet came and the social media came, we did not know that the economy could explode as it is. So a lot of young people now are either content creator, we have online vendors and all sorts. So I believe that if we open up the space in terms of the power sector, like Mr. Edun has said, it's also going to open up opportunities for the rural people to be able to be part of this economy. What are you seeing What are you advising the president? Because you're a special assistant. So what are you saying? And what is the conversation to push for this to happen, to create more opportunities for people in that particular sector?
Thank you very much. So I'm aware that we are in deep discussion with the REA, for instance, to ensure maybe like solar powered access for MSMEs across many markets. So what we are doing is where you have a market that has a cluster of small businesses, say maybe 1,000 of them or thereabouts. We are trying to power those markets to ensure that these SMEs come into their businesses daily and they have guaranteed 8 hours of light. This, we've done test runs in the past government. We did one in Ariara market, and there's one currently in Akponwo market. There are discussions to ensure that this goes around as many as possible states, as many as possible clusters of SME that we have within across the country. So I am aware that before the second quarter of 2024, this will be ramped up significantly. And aside from that, we are also trying to ensure that massive projects going forward, where you have clusters of SMEs, could it be manufacturers, could it be printers, wherever you have large clusters of SMEs, try to ensure that they have, we create alternative source of power for them. You know, we try to ensure that everybody now is thinking solar, at least at the minimum. Thinking solar, because by the time you calculate what a small business owner spends on his generator, trying to fuel his generator a day, if somebody makes 10,000 naira a day, that is probably not his profit. If we say give and take, his profit is 5,000 naira, and this person spends 3,000 naira fueling his generator a day. So if we say these people even work for 30 days, just let's consider they work for 30 days. So a person that could have made 5,000 a day times 30, 180,000 naira, is now making 2,000 times 30, 60,000 naira. He spent a larger part of the money on trying to ensure that the business survives. So these are some of the things that we are looking at, not just looking at it, we are working strongly behind the scene. I think it's a situation where we want to try and ensure that we are doing, we make some of these plans to the public, we make it very open to the public, and the next thing the public sees is action. You know, they are able to say, oh, this was said in January, and this is March. We can see that they are followed through on whatever it is that they said they're going to do. So we are working in that regard, because if you check all Mr. President's trips abroad, or even in Nigeria, he tries to chip it in that he is strongly in search of an environment that will be seamless for small business owners to thrive. I mean, it is a no-brainer that we have to create such an environment for our businesses. If not, then we have no business being a nation. Our small businesses must be able to operate on their own. All they need is government's support. So you create the enabling environment for them to survive as a business or as businesses. And that is why in January, before the end of January, MSMEs across the country will now have access to a single-digit loan, a 9% single-digit loan from the Bank of Industry. It means that you can go into the Bank of Industry across the country and get access to a loan. We also have the palliative, which the Ministry of Trade and Investment is handling, the palliative that was that Mr. President approved as a result of the subsidy removal. So that also will kick in. But the loan is very important because, number one, it is a single-digit loan. And we are trying to ensure that this is sustainable. We do not want to start this, and 6 months down the line, it's not sustainable. Whilst the Bank of Industry is doing that, we also have a partnership with some commercial banks, one of which I started is the Access Bank. They also have agreed to give small business owners loans at 15%, whilst we actually push for a single-digit loan. But if you look at the fact that the average interest rate right now is hovering closer to 30% than single-digit. So we will accept that from the commercial bank, and also see what the federal government is trying to do with the Bank of England. But what is very important is that by the end of 2024, we want sustainable single-digit loans to be a thing. We want it to be the norm amongst both commercial banks and federal government and government financial institutions. Because no business, I repeat, there's no business that can thrive, that can survive on 27, 28%, even 25% interest rate for a loan. And the tenure of those loans are not even realistic. You give somebody a loan for 25% and ask them to pay back in a year, in 16 months. So you are telling those businesses to fail before they even start.
Seeing quite a lot of prospects from the advisory that you sound like you'll be offering to the federal government. And I'd just like to get a few clarifications from you about some of the things that you have said. You've talked about guaranteed 8 hours unhindered power supply for MSMEs, the importance of that. You've talked about single-digit interest loans for MSMEs. We know that all these alternative sources of power can be capital intensive. So I'd like you to elaborate on the structure that has been put in place for MSMEs to be able to access these alternative sources of energy in an affordable way. Also, the single-digit interest loan that you are proposing, is it part of the promise of the new administration from 2023 about the disbursement of 75 billion naira credit to manufacturers and to nano businesses in local government? And has that taken off, by the way, or what structure would it be assuming in 2024?
All right, thank you very much. So let's start with the issue of the sort of structure that we have in place to ensure that these small businesses are not even ripped off anyway, because you might be trying to help and you realize that some people are going behind the scenes to go and rip them off. So what this is, we are in partners with the private sector. And we're in partnership with the private sector, sorry. So what we do is that we provide them those alternative source of income, source of power. Now, the MSMEs pay a token. They're expected to pay something very, very insignificant. If you are used to fueling your tank, fueling your generator to run your business, say 2,000 to 3,000 a day, and you're asked to pay, say for instance, 200 naira or 300 naira for the solar per day, I think that, and that's a significant reduction in your cost of running your business. Now, moving to the issue of the 75 billion naira. There are two things here. Mr. President promised at the beginning of the year that he was going to give palliatives to small businesses in the manufacturing and other SME sector. That is to cushion the effects of the subsidy removal. That is in place. That is what the Ministry of Trade and Investment announced about 2 weeks ago, and I believe that the implementation process has been tidied up, and I want to suspect that that will kick in anytime in January as well. That is an aside. There is also the 75 billion naira Bank of Industry Fund. It is their own fund. What they have done for us is that they've said federal government is giving out 75 billion on its own to SMEs in the manufacturing industry and in other sectors. They are also giving out 50,000 naira to nano businesses. They've provided 50 billion to those ones. They are saying what we can do to support the government is we have our own fund. We are going to ensure we give it at 9% flat rate to SMEs, 75 billion. And that is the one that I'm saying that will begin as early as end of January 2024. It might even start before then, but that is when we have capped it to begin not later than ending of January 2024. You will be able to walk into any Bank of Industry across the country, provide them and apply for this loan. at a single digit loan, at a single digit rate. This is very, very important, at a single digit rate. And the other one with the commercial bank as well, Access Bank, you'll be able to walk into any Access Bank across the country and collect this loan at 15%. So there are options. You know, if you're able to go into the Bank of Industry and you're able to swing a loan. And one other important factor is that these loans are at a minimum of 3 years to 5 years. In most cases, these loans are going to be given at 5 years, in most cases. The one for Access Bank, if you are collecting less than 3 million, your requirements, what you are supposed to bring in terms of requirements are very insignificant. In most cases, you might need just a guarantor, somebody to say you will pay this 3 million or less than 3 million back. And you are not going to be having a whole booklet because you want to collect 1.something million naira. They are going to, we have made sure that this is simplified. We are even ensured, we're speaking to the partners to say, listen, once somebody who did not even go to school, who knows the rudiments of running his or her business to be able to apply for this thing. So you probably have a 1-pager or 2-pager that just tells you, do X, Y, Z. And then we also want to ensure that when you apply for these loans and you are qualified, it shouldn't take 6 months for you to get these loans. Because a business that needs a loan within a week or within a month, and they've been pre-qualified or they are now qualified, how then do you now apply for a loan in January and you now disburse to that person in June? That is unacceptable. We're not going to take that. So we're trying to ensure that within 14 days, these are our discussions with our partners, within 14 days, whatever fund that you need for your business and is available and you meet the criteria to get that fund, you get it. Either at the 9% from the Bank of Industry or either at the 15% from the commercial bank. The good thing is that we have other commercial banks that we're discussing with, and like I said earlier on,
all right, Mr. Johnson, if I may button
2024.
All right, if I may button, I've been looking at Mr. Iwani, and I'm sure you have your response to all of the. It sounds quite rosy, isn't it? What do you make of Mr. Johnson's proposition and some of the conversations they're having with private sector?
They're great ideas, but you see, in reality, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So, the reality is that 75 billion naira. Or let's even double it, make it 150 billion naira. In a 200 trillion naira economy, the impact, the materiality is insignificant. We went through all of this before with anchor borrowers, rice pyramids and all of that. And where did it get us to? The reality is that you must be practical and it must have an impact. Ghana, inflation went all the way to 52%. They increased interest rates and brought it down. It's now down to 24%, and it's projected to go down to 17%. The central bank governor was very clear. The primary goal of this leadership is to maintain price stability. The way to maintain price stability is to bring interest rates higher. There will be intervention programs, but the total impact of those intervention programs scattered all over the place will not change the economy. You need investments, right? And investments are a function of savings. Savings are a function of interest rates. So you cannot, on one hand, mobilize savings, which we channeled into investments, at the same time, provide facilities at 1/3 the rate of inflation. Inflation is at 30%. So you can't make omelette without breaking eggs. The reality is that there's a time for this. There will be intervention programs to subsidize subsidize productivity and increased output. But the discussion on May 29 was subsidies are gone, right? Exchange rate subsidy, cost-reflective tariff subsidies, and petrol and diesel subsidies are gone. Now, you begin to give people, you subsidize production in certain areas and make sure that output increases. The only output, the definition of inflation is that once output increases and money supply is fixed, prices begin to moderate. The projection that inflation is going to come down in 2024 to about 20 or 21% from 30% is significant. If that happens, then you can even begin to bring down interest rates sharply, so everybody gets, everybody benefits from this.
So is it that you don't see his projections working, or his conversation? Are you seeing it being feasible?
Quite frankly, even if it works, 75 billion naira is less than 0.001% of the total GDP of this country. It's not going to change. It's not going to alter output.
Are you proposing that some form of stability be achieved in the economy before this is implemented?
No.
Or you're saying that the amount should be increased?
Okay, let's take it one after the other. Interventions of this nature, right, are meant to achieve certain goals. The basic canons of taxation, because don't forget subsidies are reverse taxes, that taxation must be neutral, that it doesn't distort the allocation of resources, must be easy to administer, must generate revenue, right, and must be equitable. The cost of, managing these loans, of going there, 3,000 naira and all of that, it's not going to achieve, with all due respect, it's not going to achieve the desired objective. That's what I say.
Let me come to you, Mr. Dausa. I know in passing, you almost mentioned the Aradoma growth model in terms of investment and saving and all of that. And you also look at the shortfalls in terms of revenue and all of the deficits we try to battle with most of the time. And my question is, looking in between what Mr. Rwani is saying and Mr. Johnson is saying, do you think that the reason why we're not achieving some of the success we are supposed to achieve with that sector, maybe MSMEs sometimes, because the measures are too stopgap and not as robust as it should be?
Well, the essential thing, as Mr. Rwani has said, is skill. It is skill. Any idea you have, what is the skill? If you have 48 million SMEs in Nigeria, let us say, that's about the figure that came out a few years ago. How many SMEs will be impacted by 75 billion? Or even 200 or 500 billion out of 48 million SMEs? So that's why some of these good ideas turn out to be tokens. They are just token attempts to address the issue. Because a few people get it, but you don't see the impact. It's a great idea, but the impact is so small that you don't see it. If you distribute 75 billion across 36 states and Abuja, what do you have for each state? In each state, how many SMEs do you have in a state? And how do you share? By the time you try to share it, you haven't gone anywhere. So it's not the beauty of the idea. It's the fact that quite often we don't look at the scale of the issues. You have 200 million people. You have at least 48 million SMEs. So anything you want to do, if you want to achieve the result, must address skill. If you don't get the skill right, it will just be a drop in the ocean. Oh, you've done it, and maybe 10 people will get it in Lagos, another 10 people in Sokoto, 15 people in Bayelsa, and you don't see it because, yes, those people get it, but life is about the same in each of the states. So the issue, skill. The scale is not right, and the process, again, you land at 9%, inflation is 30%, interest normal bank rate is 27%. So where does that 9% come from?
And that raises a question about the role of states, in intervening in the informal sector. Because when we talk about the informal sector anyway, we find them, in the states, the different states of the federation. We're going to get to that. But I'm sure that Mr. Shionwedu also has, some reactions to a lot of the submissions that have been made, particularly by Mr. Adekunle Johnson in Abuja, on the structure that the interventions of the federal government will take in supporting MSMEs in the future, in 2024 to be precise, and the rural electrification program, the provision of alternative access to alternative energy sources to MSMEs. Mr. Adekunle Johnson, what are some of your reactions and submissions to what has been said?
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear the Abuja studio. So it's just tidbits from the Lagos studio I got. But from what I understand, right, my personal opinion is if grants or subsidies or soft loans are gonna be given, it should be given to producing entities, right? It depends on what we're looking to solve, just as Mr. Rwani has rightly said, what the chairman of the LCCI also buttressed. It's about scale, right? How much of soft loans or grants can the government give out directly, right? I think my opinion is that the strategy has to be in bringing as many partners to the pool as possible, and trying to itemize specifically, right, where do we want to make the most impact, right? Where do we need to make the most impact? Because it's the kind of conversations we've also been having in accelerating energy access. We can accelerate it to everyone at the same time, right? So what communities should we be targeting? What communities have the propensity for growth impact, right? Rather than take energy access to places where they really do not even need it, right? Where would we make the most impact? I think those are the strong questions we should be asking ourselves before we structure these grants or structure low interest facilities. We need to be able to say, how much of impact are we going to get? Where do we actually take these funds to have the most impact? That's my opinion of it.
I want to switch gears for a bit. Let me come back to Mr. Dausa on this one. We've talked about MSMEs and all of that, but there's a conversation we must have as far as this segment is concerned. The last Minister of Finance had mentioned issues of revenue being a problem. So I want to ask a question about, in 2024, what propositions are you giving to the federal government to ensure that the level of leakages we see in our fiscal policy or in our finances as a country is blocked as much as possible? I know that what's the committee again? The fiscal taxation committee, tax reform and all of that committee, all of this is just to make sure that, upscale as much as possible, optimize as much as possible, but don't overburden the people. So in terms of leakages, how do we block leakages? Leakages is a fundamental problem as far as our finances are concerned in Nigeria.
Well, leakages are not so much a matter of design. It's not so much a problem of system design. It's a question of the people who run the system. It's just like your elections. Elections are very easy to organize, where the people who are going to participate in the election, both the candidates and the voters, obey the rules. All government agencies have financial regulations. They have processes to avoid those leakages. But the more you design the systems, the more the people who want to beat the system find ways of beating the system. So it's not a question of how do you reduce. There will be always systems to reduce. Quite often, all these EPs with salaries, ensuring that you want to take out ghost workers, there's a whole procurement, a whole department of procurement in government that tries to apply the standard international procurement processes. But even in spite of that, you still hear again and again that government officials, from the political to the civil service, forget those in fact, set aside those laid down procedures and still get money from the system. So it's not a science of the quality of our design. It's the human beings, the shared level of, if you like, morality, the desire to want to do what the systems should do, or you just want to beat the system all the time.
All right, we cannot close this conversation without talking about the big elephant in the room, foreign exchange. I saw the presentation you did and how I always reference that, the target and actually how it ended. Yes. How will Nigeria help the Naira to regain its strength against the dollar? Because that is quite fundamental to everything, literally.
Okay. Before we go into exchange rate, let me say something clearly. The goal of revenue or debt management is defeated if you do not grow. So it's an economic growth problem. Economic growth is a function of two things. Injections are investments in, leakages are things that take it out. So you have an investment multiplier, which gets an economy to grow. When an economy is growing, all these other indicators begin to find themselves into equilibrium. That's one. But one of the major indicators that brings equilibrium between the external economy and the domestic economy is the exchange rate, the price of a currency against the others. And we've seen this go in many directions. So you have multiple exchange rates, you have all sorts of things. But basically, the thing about the exchange rate is that normally you will find that there will be an official rate and then there will be a power rate. And in good times, the difference between the two a couple of years back was about 3 or 4 naira, right? You bought a ticket, you bought it in naira, you did everything in naira. But when the sources of inflows begin to reduce, one, because of oil vandalism, two, because of restrictions and all sorts of regulations, then you begin to see that monies that were to come in normally begin to get diverted. So what you have is that the market, the exchange rate, the power market rate, is always exaggerated from its normal PPP, what we call the purchasing power parity, about 25 to 30%. It's trading at about 1,215 or 250. If you take 25% out of that, it brings you back to about 900 naira, right? So when can this exchange rate go from 1,250 to 900 naira or 800 naira? First and foremost, it will have to depreciate a little bit before coming back. And the currency, you have to remove the restrictions. You now need to have what we call an auction system, where everybody, including the central bank, will bid in the auction. Once it's transparent, the exchange rate begins to find itself close to equilibrium. You look at across the world, the South African rand is about 18, the Ghanaian cedi is gone all the way to 14 and coming down to 12. So exchange rate depreciation is not necessarily a case of death. All you have to do is to manage it properly and have a transparent system. You have to agree and be honest about what the true level of your external reserves are. You have to be honest about what your export earnings are. You have to be honest as to the system, the way it is, the auction system, how transparent it is. If there's no integrity in the data you have, if there's no integrity in the process that you run, then the currency begins to suffer. And when you start having inflation, one, at 30%, and your treasury bill interest rates at about 9 or 10%, the difference of 20% is what is going to undercut your exchange rate. So there's no question, there's no silver bullet, there's no shortcut to it. I've heard Dangote Refinery will do that. No, Dangote Refinery is going to guarantee you oil and refined products at the world price. So let's get it clear. The exchange rate will appreciate, in my view, in 2024, but more at the end of 2024 than at the beginning of 2024. So where do I think it's going? It could go maybe 900 or something like that, but we have to accept that. The airline backlog, that is one big issue. I think they came out with a number that is now $760 million that is being owed, of which $200 million is owed by the central bank and $600 million or so by the banks. So if you have sold your ticket at 1,100 naira to $1, and you cannot even remit the money, so you have to buy the money, and you buy it at 1,100, 1,200. Once that goes, then the currency begins to appreciate.
So essentially, whatever value that we create, even in the domestic production of crude and sale, and we shore up, as long as there is transparency, there's no transparency in the policy system, then we're not going to make progress.
No way.
That's very instructive. We'd like to thank you very much for your time and contribution, Mr. Bisrup Makrewani, CEO, Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
We've also had here in our Lagos studio, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, is the president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much, sir, for your time on this very significant day, December 31. We also thank Mr. Sheun Edun, who joined us via Zoom. He's the country director, Power Gen Renewable Nigeria Limited. Thank you very much for joining us as well. And we also had joining us from our Abuja studio, Mr. Tola Adekunle Johnson, who is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Job Creation and MSMEs. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and contribution on the program.